7 decades since the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, around 80 new fragments of the ancient texts had been revealed to the public. They believed these writings had vanished forever. But what if artificial intelligence just uncovered something that was never supposed to surface? In 2021, a team of archaeologists pushed into a cave untouched for 6 decades, knowing whatever waited inside could change everything. Amir from the cave. Do you hear me? I hear you. Come quickly. We've discovered amazing things. Really? What did you find? What they found wasn't just a sacred text. It was a narrative deliberately concealed, traced in Greek, framed by Hebrew, and locked away for a reason. Then technology intervened. Algorithms connected the missing pieces and gave voice to what had been silent. And what surfaced isn't something we were meant to see. Artificial intelligence has unraveled the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the truth is more unsettling than anyone expected. 15 columns of text in ancient Greek seen for the first time in almost 2,000 years. The quiet is gone, replaced by something impossible to ignore. And for anyone clinging to long-held beliefs, the next part won't be easy. Zechariah writes of what is to come from the rebuilding of the temple and Jerusalem to a coming messianic king, the descent into the cave of horror. When archaeologists dropped into a Judean cave in 2021, they weren't just searching for bones or pottery. They were after something deeper, something that had been buried under dust and time for over 60 years. What they uncovered was only the beginning. The real shock would come later when artificial intelligence stepped in to piece things together. We'll get to that. But first, let's look at where it all started. To get into the cave, researchers had to rappel straight down a steep 80-meter drop from the cliff's edge. It wasn't just risky, it was physically demanding. But for Oren Abelman and his team at the Israel Antiquities Authority, the effort was worth it. Hidden deep in those rocks were fragments of ancient texts, and not just any texts. These were pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls, small, brittle scraps that had somehow survived centuries of heat, decay, and silence. Abelman admitted that what they found wasn't much in size. These are tiny scraps, he said, but even scraps can say a lot when placed in the right order. The team managed to reassemble some of them, like a jigsaw puzzle. Slowly, phrases and meanings began to return to life, offering a rough idea of what once was. The cave where all this happened is known officially as Cave 8, but most call it something else. The Cave of Horror. That name wasn't chosen at random. It came from what was found inside. Back in the 1950s and 60s, explorers like Professor Yigal Yadan and Professor Yanana Haroni had already investigated the site. Even the local Bedouins in the Negev region had taken interest in it. Their finds painted a haunting picture. Around 35 CE, during the fall of the Bar Kokhba revolt, a group of Jewish men, women, and children had sought shelter in the cave, roughly 40 people in total. Roman forces quickly surrounded the area and camped right above the cliff, with no way out. The people inside faced an impossible choice. They refused to give up. One by one, they died trapped, thirsty and forgotten. Their skeletons remained where they fell. That, more than anything, is why the cave earned its grim name. Now fast forward to the present. These new fragments were pulled from the same cave, and thanks to modern tools, scholars were able to examine them more closely than ever before. But it is not just the human eye studying them anymore. AI has entered the picture, and what it's beginning to reveal might change everything we thought we knew about these ancient texts. Let me walk you through it. The scrolls that survived. Finding anything new in the Cave of Horror seemed doubtful after all these decades, but at times it is the tiniest details hiding in plain view that shift everything. This time, what appeared to be nothing but a stain in the dirt proved far more meaningful. More than 60 years after Professors Yigal Yadan and Yohanan Aharoni examined the caves, scientists returned with improved tools and keener vision. The cave's dry, protected, and remote environment had done well preserving whatever remained inside. Even so, the setting was not easy to handle. Low light and heavy dust layers made it difficult to notice anything unusual. One member of the team, an archaeobotanist, spotted something subtle, faint marks on a group of very small fragments. At first glance, nothing about them seemed special, but with closer study, those dusty bits revealed ink traces, hints of writing that pointed to a major find. They were pieces of an ancient scroll. It was a delicate hint that might have gone unnoticed, yet it sparked a fresh surge of excitement. In wetter regions, those fragments would have broken down beyond recognition. But within this desert cave, they remained hidden and undisturbed for almost 2,000 years. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls began in the 1940s when the earliest fragments were found. Most of these scrolls were connected to a community that lived in Qumran. Many researchers think this group was known as the Essenes, a Jewish sect with distinct beliefs and texts, though that idea is still questioned. What made the Dead Sea Scrolls such an extraordinary discovery was what they contained. They were not merely copies of familiar religious works. They held the oldest known biblical manuscripts ever found, along with Jewish texts that had disappeared over time. These writings offered a sharper view into the beliefs and debates shaping Jewish life then. They also provided insight into how early Christianity emerged within that same setting. But now another factor has entered the picture. Artificial intelligence is being used to study these fragments in ways no human could achieve, and what it is revealing. Pressing that like button might move you one step deeper into this fascinating journey. The child, the basket, and the scrolls, hidden under layers of dry soil and the dust of centuries. The cave slowly started revealing pieces of a long-lost world. Along with the scroll fragments, archaeologists discovered something deeply human close to the caves. Opening just below two flat stones, they found the mummified remains of a child, believed to be between 6 and 12 years old. The child's body had been placed gently in a fetal position with the head and torso wrapped in cloth while the feet were left uncovered. Held in its hands was another strip of fabric. The careful placement of the child suggested it had been buried with intention and care. Later testing showed the remains were around 6,000 years old. This finding was striking not only due to its age, but also because of how well it was preserved. The cave's dry air helped keep the body intact, locking it in time. Researchers think both the climate and burial method played a role in its survival through the ages. The small body wrapped and resting beneath the ground felt like a quiet message sent from the distant past. The team uncovered more as they moved deeper into the cave. There they found a large woven basket. Its condition was nearly perfect, tightly woven and clearly designed for storage. The basket was estimated to hold about 100 liters. Further testing dated it to the Neolithic period. It turned out to be the oldest basket ever discovered, dating back almost 9,000 years. Oren Abelman explained that discoveries like this give researchers fresh insight into early human progress. The basket came from the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, a time before ceramics existed. It marked an era when people in the Near East were slowly moving away from hunting and gathering. Early farming villages were beginning to form. This was a turning point in human history. People were starting to settle, grow food, and build lasting homes. The basket was more than a storage item. It reflected a way of life that was beginning to emerge. The cave revealed more than scrolls and ancient remains. It offered researchers a rare glimpse into how early people lived, cared for children, and stored supplies. Each discovery added another layer to the story. Echoes of the prophets. Not everything that survives from the past remains whole. Sometimes it reaches us in fragments, worn and broken, yet still strong enough to hold meaning. That was true of the scroll pieces uncovered during the excavation. Although incomplete, some fragments could be pieced together. Altogether, around 80 separate parchment pieces were recovered. After detailed study, researchers connected them to the Scroll of the 12, also known as the Minor Prophets Scroll. Parts of this scroll had appeared before. In the early 1950s, local Bedouin in the Nahal Havar region found similar fragments and later sold them in Jerusalem. What made these new fragments stand out was not only their age or preservation, but their language. Like earlier discoveries, these pieces were written in Greek rather than Hebrew. Researcher Oren Abelman noted this was uncommon. Most biblical texts found in the Judean desert are written in Hebrew or Aramaic. Greek scrolls of this type are rare in the area. The handwriting showed that two different scribes had worked on the text, each with a slightly distinct style. The wording did not exactly match the traditional Septuagint, the most well-known Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. However, Abelman explained that the scroll is still connected to it. It appears to be a variation or reworking of the Septuagint, suggesting that the communities who used these texts had their own approaches to preserving and understanding Scripture. The texture of the parchment matched earlier pieces found in the same region. This similarity helped researchers confirm the fragments belonged to the same scroll as those uncovered many years earlier. When it came to the writing itself, the text came from the 12 prophetic books found in both the Jewish Bible and the Christian Old Testament. Scholars managed to identify around 11 lines of writing from the newly assembled fragments. Some of those lines came from the book of Nahum. That section described divine judgment and strength, painting a picture of a world shaking beneath God's anger. Another portion referenced the book of Zechariah. That passage centered on moral responsibility and rebuilding community life after the Babylonian exile. It encouraged fairness, honesty in judgment, and warned against harmful thoughts and false promises. Although the fragments are tiny, their importance is enormous. They offer a direct glimpse into how ancient writings were read, copied, and shared. Each surviving word allows researchers to follow how sacred texts traveled through time and across cultures. And within these pieces of parchment, buried for centuries and almost lost, there remains a link to voices that once read them aloud and passed them on. Line after line, scroll after scroll, digital eyes on ancient ink. What happens when something ancient is paired with modern technology to bring it back to life? That was the challenge researchers faced when studying the fragile fragments from the Cave of Horror. At first glance, the pieces did not look impressive. Most were tiny, some no bigger than a fingernail. They had been cracked, darkened, and weakened by nearly 2,000 years of wear and decay. With so many damaged pieces scattered apart, where do you even start? Traditional methods could only go so far, and there was always the danger of causing further damage during examination. The team needed a new approach. This time, they turned to artificial intelligence. They were not searching for hidden messages or secret codes. Their aim was straightforward. They wanted to recover as much original text as possible without harming what remained. To begin, every fragment was scanned under multiple types of light, including visible, infrared, and ultraviolet. This process revealed faint markings that the human eye could not detect. Then came the more complex step. The team used optical character recognition, or OCR, but not the type designed for modern print. This system was trained specifically to read ancient scripts. It could identify faded Greek and early Hebrew letters that were barely visible. Each character slowly emerged again, stroke by stroke. But scanning and reading were just the start. Once the fragments were digitized, they were processed through a deep learning system. This artificial intelligence had been trained on vast collections of ancient manuscripts, scrolls, and inscriptions. It did more than recognize words. It identified patterns, handwriting styles, scroll layouts, and even ink types that appeared across different fragments. So, what did all this information uncover? Not predictions of the future, but evidence of people. The AI began to notice that certain scrolls originated from the same sources. They shared handwriting traits, stitching methods, and papyrus textures that pointed to organized scribal workshops where texts were carefully produced and copied. Even in distant, isolated communities, there was order and intention, and where human eyes fell short, artificial intelligence saw clearly what the ink revealed. Beneath the ancient writing, the scrolls carried something far more personal. As scans were processed and data continued to build, something unexpected drew the attention of researchers. At first, it appeared as tiny details, but when the AI examined the scrolls more deeply, it detected something human, something intimate. How was that even possible? Was it truly seeing beyond the words themselves? Multispectral imaging and machine learning had already helped restore faded text. But now, paleographers were witnessing something entirely different. The algorithms were not just reading language. They were spotting movement patterns, slight irregularities that pointed to the person holding the pen. Think about recognizing nervousness in someone's handwriting. The same principle applied here. Every stroke, however small, reflected part of the scribe's state. A letter tilting slightly or ink thinning midline revealed subtle clues, pressure changes, hesitation, uneven flow. It felt like following a hand across time. Each variation became a unique fingerprint preserved despite centuries of decay. Then one fragment stood out clearly. It came from the Book of Nahum. At first look, it seemed hurried, even messy, sharp letters thinning ink. Some characters sagged, while others leaned forward. But the AI did not see it as sloppiness. Instead, it detected micro-tremors inside the strokes. That level of detail suggested something deeper. Was the writer sick? Were their hands shaking from fear or old age? Could they have been hiding, rushing to save scripture before everything was lost? In that moment, the scrolls became more than ancient writings. They turned into snapshots of survival. Not just religious texts, but emotional records created by hands trying to preserve meaning while the world around them fell apart. No one knows who wrote that line, but the pressure of their grip, the tremble of their wrist still remains. And through modern technology, we were finally able to see it, tracing the scrolls. Just when it seemed the fragments had given all they could, another layer of meaning began to appear. One that linked geography, language, and history together. As mentioned earlier, scholars once believed a single group, possibly the Assyrians, produced the scrolls. But that idea began to weaken once AI analysis entered the picture. With tools capable of detecting the smallest differences in ink composition, chemical makeup, parchment texture, and handwriting style, a broader and more complex story emerged. The scrolls were written not only in Biblical Hebrew and Aramaic, but also in Greek and Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew was usually reserved for sacred names. On its own, that was not unusual. But when these fragments started appearing far beyond Qumran in places like Wadi Maraba and the Cave of Horror, new questions surfaced. Why were they scattered so widely? And were they truly all created by one single community? That was when AI-based analysis began cutting through ideas that had gone unchallenged for decades. As machines tracked fine linguistic differences and compared them with known regional writing styles, a surprise took shape. The uniform way these scrolls were produced and copied, even though they were found far apart, pointed to a level of organization no one had expected. Some fragments even showed intentional edits, retraced ink, and stitched edges that appeared hurried, as if someone was racing to save what they could during an emergency. Who was responsible for this work, and why was it done so quickly? What once seemed like the effort of a single isolated sect now looked more like the work of several groups, possibly communities spread across Jerusalem and the Galilee. In fact, some text variations found in the newer Cave of Horror fragments were missing entirely from the Qumran collection. Instead, they matched versions known from other Jewish groups closer to the city during Roman rule. Was this driven by fear, survival, or a last attempt to protect knowledge from disappearing? Many scholars now think this was a coordinated mission to keep sacred writings from being lost forever. They believe this effort unfolded during the turmoil following the destruction of the Second Temple. As cities collapsed and hope faded, scrolls were handed off from person to person. Some were carried through the desert, hidden inside caves, or even buried alongside the dead. Picture what that journey may have looked like. Scribes taking deadly risks, messengers moving quietly past enemy forces, guardians sealing bundles of scripture beneath heavy stone. If you enjoyed this journey with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next.